The reputation of John Brunner rests largely on his 4 tract novels published between 1968 and 1975. Complex and imposing, they're fictional explorations of issues and crises facing society in the latter part of the 20th century. Originally published in 1969, The Jagged Orbit is the second of these novels, and Brunner's follow-up to his landmark Stand on Zanzibar, the first British novel to win the Hugo Award. Welcome to episode 147, and welcome to the broken up remnants of the United States in 2014, where racial animosity is stoked and exploited to sell military weapons to anyone who can afford to buy. First, a quick heads up. Soon the podcast will reach episode 150. To mark this, there'll be a special Q&A episode. I'll be answering questions from listeners about anything to do with classic science fiction. To submit your question by the 17th of March, use the contact form at andyjohnson.xyz, reply to my post on Blue Sky, or send me a text using the link in the show notes for any episode. I'm excited to hear from you. In John Brunner's novel The Jagged Orbit, it is 2014 and the United States is in decline. The federal government oversees a patchwork of segregated city-states. White people and people of colour live in mutual suspicion, stoked in part by a powerful weapons manufacturer which floods cities with high-end firepower. Computer descataries and omnipresent mass media put information in easy reach, but people live behind armoured doors, frightened to go outside. The second of Brunner's 4 tract novels speculating about the issues awaiting in the 21st century, The Jagged Orbit, is a caution against over-reliance on technology, a warning about the concentration of power in the hands of the wealthy, and a plea for genuine human connection. Still relevant today, it vindicates Brunner's boldly predictive approach and underlines the importance of this under-recognised writer. John Brunner, who lived from 1934 to 1995, was a prolific British science fiction writer. He built his career writing fast-paced, pulpy novels for Ace Books in the early 1960s, but his reputation rests on his later, more ambitious work. Between 1968 and 1975, he published 4 landmark novels which confronted and extrapolated some of the emerging shifts of the late 20th century. Using deep research and experimental techniques, Brunner explored overpopulation, computerization, pollution, urban unrest, racism, and economic change. The first of these novels, Stand on Zanzibar, published in 1968, made Brunner the first ever British winner of the Hugo Award for Best Novel. The Jagged Orbit is a continuation of Brunner's award-winning approach to Stand on Zanzibar. It retains the multiple viewpoints, inserted documents, and structural trickery of its predecessor, but is a more compact and in some ways more focused piece of work. Like much of Stand on Zanzibar, The Jagged Orbit is set in New York City. The Big Apple has become a city of fear, primed for an ugly war of all against all. Citizens buy military-grade weapons from their local representative of the Gottschalk Arms Combine, lock themselves into fortress-like apartments, and numb their minds with infomercials broadcast onto their view sets. Brunner's typically kaleidoscopic plot follows several individuals with distinct roles in this warped society. Matthew Flaman is a spool pigeon, a semi-independent investigative journalist who likes to think he operates in the public interest. Lila Clay is a young Pythoness who earns money by entering drug-induced trances and making unconscious cryptic predictions. James Reedeth is a doctor at a massive mental institution run by the reclusive Elias Mogshak, who wants everyone in New York, if not everyone in the United States, exposed to his unique methods. When a notorious white supremacist is allowed entry into the US, he sparks deadly riots which play into the hands of the Gottschalks. The Merchants of Death have still other plots in motion, one involving one of Reedeth's patients, who has an uncanny facility with computers. The city of fear is primed to explode. Brunner prided himself on his attention to and connection with the United States. As with some other British writers, like Bob Shaw, many of his novels were published there first, rather than at home in the UK. Brunner visited the US numerous times, meeting with publishers, booksellers and fans. His resulting transatlanticism separated him, sometimes unpleasantly, from his British colleagues, who saw him as overly American in focus and style. Brunner sought to master American idiom and to get a sense of developments in US society. As the Science Fiction Encyclopedia puts it wryly, the anti-Americanism in Stand on Zanzibar, quote, has a satisfyingly American ring to it. The Jagged Orbit is one of Brunner's acutely American novels. It projects a number of trends prominent in American society of the late 1960s into a troubling but not wholly dystopian future outlook. Brunner's New York, a cauldron of racist suspicion and regular mass violence, recalls the Watts riots that took place in Los Angeles in August 1965, as well as the deadly Detroit riots which marked the peak of the long hot summer of 1967. The heavily mediatized environment in which Flammon participates recalls the growing importance of television, and Clay's trances are steeped in the transcendental drug culture of the 60s. Arguably, Brunner's principal point with the Jagged Orbit was a plea to prioritize genuine human connection over dependence on technology. Much of the urban population in the novel are stupefied by infomercial television and blithely reliant on computers. These machines, including Descataries, need carefully crafted prompts and operate within limited bounds, restricting or mangling useful information. It's easy to see the thread from these devices to the so-called AI algorithms of today, which are just as apt to promote laziness and misinformation. In contrast, Brunner's more enlightened characters argue strongly for real human interactions, for genuine dialogue which breaks down barriers and dissipates the climate of fear on which the villains feed and profit from. It's a message which remains powerful over 50 years later. The Jagged Orbit is not among Brunner's strongest works, being overly focused on sometimes didactic dialogue and never coalescing strongly enough around a specific theme. It is intermittently fascinating, however, and well worth seeking out for those who enjoy the approach taken by the much better known Stand on Zanzibar. Thanks for listening. For more classic science fiction reviews, visit andyjohnson.xyz. You can also find the show on YouTube and follow updates on Blue Sky. In both cases, just search Classic SF with Andy Johnson. Finally, to get in touch, use the contact form on my site or hit the link in the episode description to send a text message.